he shot her, and he killed her. His mission accomplished.
They hate you. You're gonna die. I don't want to do this.
Thank you for watching Why I Killed You TV. Please do not forget to subscribe, comment, and share to this particular video on this particular channel. Today we're going to be talking about Brooklyn Sims. Brooklyn Sims was just 18 years old. She was a young mother with a 2-year-old daughter. She was working at a Home Depot in Pensacola, Florida, trying to build a better life for not only her, but her daughter as well, her 2-year-old daughter. On August 11, 2023, her ex-boyfriend, Keith Agee, who was 20 years old at the time, believed that Brooklyn had given him an STD. He drove all the way from Alabama, where he lived, to Florida armed with a gun. Brooklyn had tested negative, but Keith didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. Brooklyn tested negative, but Keith did not believe it. He still believed that Brooklyn had given him an STD. He walked into the store and found her in the aisle and shot her multiple times in front of customers and co-workers. It was devastating. Now, this is the kicker. This is the icing on the cake. This is disgusting. Keith's mother, Sheila Agee, also worked at the same Home Depot. Text messages were found between Keith and his mother, Sheila Agee, about the plan for him to murder Brooklyn. She even told him to do it at the store so that her grandchild would not see it. Sheila was later charged with murder as well, thank goodness. Keith Agee was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sheila Agee's trial, however, ended in a mistrial, and a new trial is yet to be scheduled. Brooklyn Sims was a smart, very smart young lady. She just happened to pick the wrong guy to have a baby with. She didn't deserve to die over a false rumor or jealousy. Her story is a reminder of how dangerous toxic relationships can often be. Let's run this clip.
He shot her, and he killed her. His mission accomplished.
This is Court TV Live. We are your front row seat to justice. I'm your host, Julie Grant, and it's great to see you on this Wednesday morning. So this hour, we are showing you a murder trial out of Florida. Defendant, 20-year-old Keith Agee, faces a jury on 1 count of premeditated first-degree murder. Prosecutors are alleging that Agee shot and killed 18-year-old Brooklyn Sims, who was working at a local Home Depot as a contract employee. Agee and Sims share a 2-year-old daughter together, and the state believes that Agee killed Sims due to a positive STD test result that he received just days after being intimate with the victim. Now, this trial started earlier this week, and WEAR has been there for it all, and we're bringing you the very best moments from this case, starting with the opening statements from the state and the defense.
On August 11, 2023, this defendant, Keith Agee, was on his own mission. And what the evidence will show and the state will prove is that his mission was to find, shoot, and kill Brooklyn Sims. You are going to hear that this defendant left his job in Alabama. He drove 1.5 hours to 2 hours from Alabama to Pensacola to the Home Depot. He parked his car in the parking lot. He walked to the front entrance of the Home Depot, and he literally walked directly to the aisle where Brooklyn Sims was working at that time. He then fired at least 7 shots from a 9mm handgun directly at Brooklyn Sims. At that point, he found her, he shot her, and he killed her. His mission accomplished. He then ran out of the store, he got into his car, and he drove away. As he drove away, he threw out the gun. He drove to a nearby parking lot over by the Lowe's where he parked the car that he'd been driving. He left it there, and then he ultimately made his way to the movie theater on Bayou Boulevard. He called 911 to turn himself in, and then he was ultimately taken into custody. Those are the basic facts of this case.
Sickening.
And the evidence
senseless.
that you're going to hear that will support the facts of this case will include cell phone tower records that will show this defendant's movement from Alabama to Florida. You will see video surveillance from the Home Depot. There was not a camera on the aisle where Brooklyn was shot and killed, but you will see this defendant walk into the store, and then you will see him run out of the store. You will see 7 spent 9mm shell casings that were found at the Home Depot. You will see pictures of where the firearm was found on the side of the road. You will hear testimony that this defendant's DNA is on that firearm. You will hear testimony that the spent shell casings from the Home Depot were fired from the same firearm. You will see pictures of where the car was parked and located that the defendant drove that day. And once it was searched and photos were taken, you're going to see a work jacket that was inside the car. It's blue and it has some yellow and white reflector strips on it. And when
So it's obvious, Mr. Agee, you had some relationships with other people, and you have killed the wrong person. That's what happened in a nutshell.
you see the video from the Home Depot that day, you can't miss this jacket. It also has his name on it and where he was working. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a very general overview of what the state believes the evidence will show during the course of this trial. And once you've heard all of the evidence and you apply the law, you will be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant, Keith Agee, committed the first-degree murder of Brooklyn Sims and is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Yes.
I want to first thank y'all for bearing with us through the process yesterday. I know it gets repetitive and it took a lot of your time, so we appreciate you for being here today. I know, like the judge said yesterday, a jury summons isn't an invitation, but we appreciate your service, and we're asking you to pay attention today and render a fair and impartial verdict at the end of this trial. This opening statement isn't the time to argue, so I just want to touch on a few basic principles. I know this is repetitive and we discussed them in depth yesterday, but they're important. We discussed the presumption of innocence, how in the courtroom setting you're required to apply that presumption to the defendant like it's someone that's close to you, okay? And presume them innocent and believe they're innocent until you've seen evidence otherwise. We talked about how the state has the burden of proof in a case like this. They've brought the charges. They have to provide the evidence to back it up. My side has to prove nothing. I don't have to prove innocence or anything else. The evidence the state brings has to convince you beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that a crime was committed and my client was the one that committed that crime.
He did.
And you'll have these instructions given to you at the end of this trial in writing before you go back to make your decision. We talked about how every criminal defendant has a right not to testify. And if he chooses to exercise that right, it's not to weigh into your ultimate conclusion. You're not to hold it against him. A term you probably heard a million times yesterday from both sides was the term fair and impartial. And you all were selected to be on this jury because you all said you could be fair and impartial in a case like this. And that's what we're asking of you. Now, this is going to be a 2-day trial like we all expect.
Come on, Greg. Taking too long.
The way it's going to shake down is that today you're going to hear from the state. Tomorrow, if we put on a case, it will be then. And ultimately, at the end of the trial, both sides get to come back up here and argue what the facts you've heard mean. Now, this is going to be a bit different type of case than is normally tried in criminal court. And as far as that, I don't expect to contest a lot of the facts and the evidence that the state puts on. You heard the government's attorney tell you everything they anticipate showing to you. There's going to be high-resolution surveillance video from the Home Depot, scores of witnesses that are unbiased and impartial, cell phone tracking data. A lot of this stuff is not going to be in dispute. But at the end of this trial, I'm going to ask you to as being fair and impartial jurors selected to hear the facts of this case and ultimately reach a decision, I'm going to ask you to determine whether this was a cold, calculated, premeditated first-degree murder, as the state's charged it, or was it something else?
In the late hours of August 11th, 2023, 18-year-old Brooklyn Sims was shot multiple times while working at a Home Depot. When police arrived to find Brooklyn's lifeless body, witnesses at the scene were horrified to identify her husband, Keith Agee, as the shooter. But as investigators pieced together the events, they uncovered a devastating truth that would shock everyone. Her husband had murdered Brooklyn after receiving STD results. Convinced she had been unfaithful, he decided to take her life. But the most painful and shocking part was when it was later revealed that the results were fake.
The STD is curable. Brooklyn Sims' murder is not. 29 holes he riddled into her body.
Wow.
Didn't cure his STD, but it cured his pride.
But we learned after the verdict, Sims didn't have an STD. Prosecutors gave the judge evidence that showed she tested negative days before the shooting.
This is the heart-breaking story of Brooklyn Sims.
I came back from a lunch break. I went behind the counter to go pick up my trusty iPad I use for surveying. And I was talking to a coworker, and I heard pop, 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 like 5 or 6 rounds go off. And I realized it was a gun.
18-year-old Brooklyn Taylor Sims lived in Pensacola, Florida. Although she was originally from Citronelle, Alabama, she was born to Cornelia Sims and had 2 siblings. Brooklyn was described by her family and friends as a soft-spoken young lady with a heart full of gold. She carried a bright smile wherever she went, and a person who brought happiness with her wherever she went. Her outgoing nature made her the life of any party, and she had a way of making friends easily. Her family shared that to know Brooklyn was truly to love her, a magnetic energy that could have drawn Brooklyn into a relationship that ultimately played a role in her tragic death. In the summer of 2020, when Brooklyn was just 15 years old and a freshman in high school, her life took a significant turn. During this time, she met then 17-year-old Keith Eric Agee Jr. Keith, with his charming demeanor and easy smile, quickly caught Brooklyn's attention. From the moment their paths crossed, there was an undeniable spark between them. What started as innocent companionship was turning into something that would soon change Brooklyn's life forever. Although they initially started off as friends, their connection deepened over time. Keith's charisma and confidence drew Brooklyn in, and it wasn't long before the two would start spending lots of time together, doing typical teenage things. Their friendship blossomed into a young romance, and it wasn't long before this romance would lead to a life-altering chapter neither of them expected so soon. At just 16 years old, Brooklyn became pregnant with Keith's baby. As expected, Brooklyn's family was obviously concerned about how the young couple would handle the responsibilities of parenthood. After all, Brooklyn was just 16 and Keith was only 18. But despite their initial worries, they stood firmly behind her. On the other hand, Brooklyn and soon-to-be father Keith were over the moon. Despite their young age, both Brooklyn and Keith embraced the news with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Their relationship seemed to grow stronger as they prepared to become parents. As their roles as parents got closer, they realized their carefree teenage dreams would soon be replaced by responsibilities they weren't ready for. From the moment Brooklyn and Keith started dating, their relationship was far from perfect. However, as the days passed and the pressure of parenthood got closer, they started having constant arguments and misunderstandings. Brooklyn, being young and in love, struggled to understand the reasons. Despite her desire to build a future with Keith, something felt off. From the outside, Brooklyn thought she knew who Keith was, but beneath the surface, he was hiding more than she could have imagined. Keith Eric Agee Jr. was born on January 6, 2003, in Alabama to 54-year-old Keith Agee Sr. and 50-year-old Sheila Rivers Agee. He grew up with the benefits of having both his parents present in his life, as the eldest of Keith Sr. and Sheila's 2 children together.
So the mother, this is the mother, she encouraged him to do this to Brooklyn. She encouraged him, per the text messages, to kill Brooklyn. So what kind of psychotic mother do you have that would do something like this? This is crazy.
Together, little Keith held a unique place in the family. Though their family structure might have seemed stable from the outside, things beneath the surface were more complicated. Sheila and Big Keith had been together for nearly 2 decades, but their relationship was far from smooth. Sheila, known for her fiery personality and outspoken nature,
different.
frequently aired their relationship issues online. That was until 2018. The couple decided to officially call it quits. Despite the separation, Sheila remained closely bonded with her children, particularly with little Keith. He was often seen by her side, and it appeared that he would get away with more than his siblings ever did. And as he grew older, those early red flags would become harder to ignore. Underneath Keith's charm was a dark side that Brooklyn hadn't seen yet. Keith had a history of domestic violence. Allegedly, he had been arrested multiple times over the years. On January 18, 2022, Keith was picked up on charges of harassing communications and third-degree assault. Just a few months later, on April 14, 2022, he was arrested again, this time for domestic violence, third degree. According to a news article, Keith was said to have anger management issues, something that friends and family had allegedly witnessed firsthand. In one particularly alarming incident, Keith reportedly threw a brick through his own mother's window during a heated altercation. His record didn't stop there. He also faced misdemeanor assault charges involving other individuals. Even more concerning, he was said to have protective orders filed against him by 2 different women, with one of them allegedly stating that Keith had threatened to shoot her. And while some charges were eventually dismissed, the pattern remained. In February,
Keith has had some issues, that's for sure. And for you to throw a brick through your own mother's window, you got some issues. You really do. But your mother's crazy too.
2023, Keith was arrested again on domestic violence charges, although those were later dropped in May 2023. The man Brooklyn thought she knew was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. On October 15th, 2021, Brooklyn and Keith welcomed their baby girl into the world. Brooklyn lovingly named her Casey Brooke Agee. Despite her young age, Brooklyn embraced motherhood with a level of maturity far beyond her years. She was overjoyed to have her daughter. Those close to Brooklyn described her as a deeply loving and devoted mother. At the time, Brooklyn's relationship with Keith was already on a roller coaster. While Keith was living in Calvert, Alabama, Brooklyn and Casey lived in Pensacola, Florida. All Brooklyn ever wanted was to give her baby the best life possible. And if that meant continuing to co-parent with Keith, that's exactly what she was willing to do. Keith would later admit that the two still slept together occasionally, and from time to time, Brooklyn would spend time at his place, or he at hers, watching movies, laughing, and playing with Casey. But Brooklyn understood that being a good mother didn't stop at emotional support. She needed to be there for Casey financially too. So with the help of Keith's mother, Sheila, she was able to start working. She got a job working at a Home Depot as an inventory associate. Sheila, Keith's mother, would often give Brooklyn rides to work and was the one who drove her in on the morning of August 11th, a day that, unknown to them both, would become tragically unforgettable. August 11th, 2023, started like any other ordinary day. According to Keith, he had worked the night before and was scheduled to return to work the same day. He woke up, got dressed, and headed out, and then arrived at his job shortly afterward. But beneath the surface of that morning routine, a storm had already begun brewing. A few weeks prior, Keith had started experiencing some troubling symptoms. a burning sensation while urinating, discomfort, and an unusual pain that he couldn't ignore. Concerned, he visited a local urgent care clinic and underwent an STD test, hoping it was nothing serious. Unfortunately, the result of that test would set off a chain of events that nobody could have imagined. While at work, Keith received a phone call from the urgent care facility. The healthcare worker told Keith he had tested positive for gonorrhea. The news hit him hard, and instantly he claimed to feel a mix of betrayal, humiliation, and rage. But rather than responding by seeking a mature conversation with Brooklyn, Keith allowed his anger to get the better part of him and toward something dangerous. Keith would later claim that the last time he had been intimate with someone other than Brooklyn was 2 months earlier. Since that single hookup, he insisted, Brooklyn had been the only woman in his life. So when he received the devastating news of his STD diagnosis, he immediately pointed the finger at her. In his mind, Brooklyn had to be the one who gave it to him. Keith decided to take matters into his own hands. His emotions quickly spiraled into a dark thought, and the worst part? He didn't keep those thoughts to himself. According to evidence later recovered by investigators, after Keith received the results, he texted his mother, Keith Agee, expressing his anger and telling her outright that he wanted to kill Brooklyn for what she had done to him.
Wow.
But what's even more horrifying than his message was his mother's response. Sheila's reply was not one of concern, disbelief, or even hesitation.
She looks crazy.
She didn't try to talk him down.
She's accused of providing her son with an alternative plan for the murder different than his plan to shoot Sims in the parking lot, providing the exact location of where Brooklyn Sims could be found, and also advising him not to tell his nanny because she'll try and talk him out of it.
Didn't ask him to pause and have a rethink. Instead, she appeared to go along with it without question and even helped him plan what to do next. The most disturbing part? Remember how I mentioned that?
So she even said jokingly in the text messages, as long as you don't shoot me, that she was okay that her son goes to the Home Depot and shoots Brooklyn. The lady is a nut job.
Brooklyn started working at Home Depot. Sheila was not only a manager at the same store, but she was actually the one who hired Brooklyn. In fact, Sheila would sometimes drive Brooklyn to work. She was even the one who gave her a ride on the day of the incident. Keith was at work when he received the call about the positive STD test. While texting his mother, he left work and drove the short distance home. There, he quickly ran inside, grabbed his 9mm handgun, and got back into his car. Fueled by anger and betrayal, Keith began driving to Pensacola, heading straight to the Home Depot where Brooklyn worked, with revenge on his mind. For the next 90 minutes, he stewed in rage behind the wheel, consumed by thoughts of what he believed Brooklyn had done to him. Surveillance footage from Home Depot shows Keith arriving and entering the store around 1:30 p.m. He walked down the aisles, searching for Brooklyn, until he spotted her in aisle 52. Despite claiming he only wanted to talk, what unfolded next would change countless lives in a matter of seconds. According to Keith, seeing Brooklyn in person momentarily snapped him back to reality. He claimed he didn't feel quite as enraged as he had in the car, but he still wanted answers. He approached her, tapped her on the shoulder, and said, "Hey, you gave me something." Brooklyn, clearly frustrated, responded, "Not this again," and turned away, attempting to walk off. According to Keith, Brooklyn's response triggered a rage like he'd never experienced before. He claimed he had never felt angrier in his life. At that moment, he pulled the gun from his waistband and began firing over and over again. In total,
So your dumb mother told you to do this in front of how many witnesses? You stupid, she stupid too. Two dummies together.
Keith fired 7 rounds from his pistol. Several of those bullets struck Brooklyn, killing her on the scene. But she wasn't the only victim. 2 other Home Depot employees were working in the same aisle at that time. One of them was grazed in the back by a bullet trying to run. The other was shot in the hand as she attempted to run away. Both were rushed to the hospital, and they both survived with only minor injuries. While chaos unfolded inside, another employee who heard the gunshots ran behind the counter and called 911. Immediately after the shooting, Keith fled the scene. He ran out of the Home Depot, jumped into his car, and sped off. While driving, he tossed the gun out of the window and eventually parked near a nearby Lowe's. From there, he walked toward a movie theater but stopped at a pizza restaurant in the same lot, where he calmly called 911 and turned himself in.
Then you turn yourself in. What?
What followed Keith's surrender was a quiet contrast to the chaos that he had created. When police arrived at the scene, they found Keith shirtless and walking toward them in the parking lot. He surrendered without incident and was immediately taken into custody. He was later charged with the murder of Brooklyn Sims.
A dummy.
Investigators began searching the surrounding area for the weapon used in the shooting, and they found it. The gun was discovered lying on the side of Davis Highway, exactly where Keith had thrown it from his car. At his initial court hearing, Keith was denied bail and ordered to remain in jail as he awaited trial. But while the evidence clearly pointed to Keith as the shooter, investigators still wanted to understand why this happened and what pushed him to such a violent breaking point.
His mother.
They began digging through Keith's phone records and extracted data from his device. That was when they uncovered a series of disturbing evidence. Not only had Keith planned the murder ahead of time, driving to Pensacola, fully intending to kill Brooklyn, but his own mother knew about the plan.
Crazy.
And worse, she encouraged it and even called him a coward if he didn't go through with it. She encouraged him to do it now and even provided Brooklyn's exact location.
EAR has reported we know the last text message between the two came from Sheila Agee. That reads, "Okay then, stop texting me, I'm working. Do whatever." It was shortly after this, according to a witness account in the report, the shooter walked up to the victim, said a few words, and fired approximately 8 shots before running out of the store.
Because of her involvement, 50-year-old Sheila Agee was arrested and charged with principal to first-degree murder in connection with the death of 18-year-old Brooklyn Sims. Sheila didn't just know about Keith's violent intentions, she enabled them. She knew Brooklyn was in immediate danger and still allowed her son to drive 90 minutes to carry out his plan. During her initial bond hearing, Sheila's attorney claimed the text messages were taken out of context and didn't mean what they appeared to say.
Capital offense that was allegedly perpetrated by her son, and she is a principal to the alleged incident. The majority of the evidence that the court has reviewed is text messages that were taken out of context, and Your Honor, to my knowledge, she has little or no prior criminal history that would support such a charge, notwithstanding the fact that the state is
She's psychotic.
She's not entitled
That's for sure.
as a matter of right for a bond. However, the first appearance judge can still issue a bond and would be asking for a $250,000 bond, cash or professional, Your Honor.
The context was painfully clear. Authorities knew what those texts meant, and it was enough to deny her bail. Sheila remained in jail as she awaited trial. In December 2023, Keith's trial for first-degree murder began. The prosecution argued that Keith made a calculated decision to kill Brooklyn after receiving the STD results. He immediately texted his mother, retrieved his 9mm handgun from home, and drove straight to Pensacola with the intention of shooting and killing Brooklyn.
If you look at the text message, she's telling him, make sure that you don't shoot me. And if you don't shoot her, you are a bleeping. It's like she was almost daring her son to take someone else's life. Who does that?
Keith is Brooklyn's ex and the father of their 22-month-old daughter, Casey. Roxana says Sheila got Brooklyn the job working for a third-party contractor performing inventory at Home Depot. Roxana says Sheila drove Brooklyn to work and knew exactly what was going to happen to her on Friday.
That is the most sickest thing that you could think of. It was sick and sadistic to me. Like she said, what kind of human can come to a place where your son is accused of taking someone else's child's life, and then to find out that you had a hand in orchestrating it. You gave him the time, you gave him the address, you gave him instructions on basically how to take someone else's child's life.
They hate you. You're gonna die. I don't want to do this.